Hi. So this is part 4 of our book, Posted. I'm going to be starting on page 25 if you do have the book. Remember, I said you didn't have to have it. You can just listen to it. But make sure you're going through all of the clips because when we do come back together, we are going to be doing some questions and projects on this, okay? So page 25. Ruby's text, seen by Miss Shears, and then the big ham, and eventually by most of the student body, was, as one concerned teacher put it, the straw that broke the camel's back. Though, if I had to guess, I'd say the camel was pretty well dead before Ruby had her phone taken away. After all, there had been several incidents of technology misuse before Ruby's rant against Mr. Jackson. Facebook post, crude pics on Instagram, a whole Snapchat exchange that got 2 kids sent home for 3 days. Flame wars, threats, at least a dozen instances of kids getting caught using their phones to cheat on tests. No doubt, Principal Whittingham had hundreds more occurrences written up in his files, more than enough to fuel a crusade. Ruby's text was simply a spark. A catalyst. Word spread quickly outside the walls of Branton Middle School. Kids told their parents, parents told other parents. Whittingham sent out a message to every family calling for a school community meeting. In the span of only 48 hours, it suddenly became clear to every teacher, parent, and administrator that cell phones, with their texts and their apps and their electric buzzy addictiveness, were no longer just a nuisance. They represented a clear and present danger to every student at BMS. The meeting was held. Studies were cited. Statistics were shown. Other school systems were held up as models. Turns out cell phones were to blame for everything wrong in the world. They weren't just the primary avenue for bullying, though that was brought up several times. They were also eating away at our brain cells. They were almost solely responsible for the decline in test scores in Fulton County in particular, and for the failure of the American education system in general. They caused cancer. They would suck out our soul. They were the next step in mankind's eventual demise. Forget the fact that half the adults in the room were using their phones to find even more statistics from why phones were bad for you. The point was, in school anyways, cell phones were a menace. Confiscating them, Principal Whittingham argued, is not simply a matter of sound educational policy. It's in our best national interest. A vote was taken. The majority ruled. The students got no say. A new school policy was written into the student code book. No more phones, period. Not in lockers, not in pockets, not in backpacks. They were to stay at home. If you absolutely had to bring one for emergency reasons or for use after school, it would be turned in at the office at the start of the day, placed in a labeled Ziploc baggie, and kept there until the final bell. If your parents called to tell you your Aunt Tilda slipped in the bathroom and stabbed herself in the eye with her own toothbrush, the secretary would take a message and have you called down to the office. Principal Whittingham couldn't control what was said and done off school grounds, but while we were inside the cinder block walls of BMS, there would be no texting, calling, posting, playing, or surfing. We were there to learn. Case closed. A few parents protested, complained that their kids had a right to keep their electronic devices on them at all times. The administration reminded them that there was nothing in the U.S. Constitution specifically governing the individual rights of cell phone carrying minors. Having a phone was a privilege, and one that the students of Branton Middle School had finally lost. When the vote was passed, Mr. Jackson looked like a cat that just ate a 300-pound canary. Ruby just stared at her shoes. They were white chucks with red letters to match the color of her cheeks. Everyone blamed her, of course, though it could just as easily have been them who'd gotten caught. Afterward, they went online telling her thanks for ruining our lives and that she should find a tornado and get sucked back to Oz. A couple more eloquent students posted long messages directed at the administration, asking them to reconsider. The Fulton County Gazette published 2 pages worth of articles about it in Sunday's editorial section, mostly in favor of the new rule. Everyone had to get all their online complaining out before Monday, when the school's new policy would take effect and would all be disconnected for good. The new rules were clearly posted on 2 different signs on the way in and on several more scattered throughout the halls, informing students that any phones or tablets found in a student's possession would be confiscated immediately, and the student would receive a warning. If it happened again, it was an automatic 1-day suspension. After that, it got even worse. By the end of the week, 17 kids had been suspended. The administration was in full crackdown. Miss Shears looked like a sniper sitting at her desk. Not that it mattered to me, of course, because of the budget and all. Bench and Wolf both had phones, but Bench just used his to call his father for a ride after practice, and Wolf mostly used his to listen to music. Only one of us heartbroken was Dee Dee. He was a member of several online gaming communities and even contributed to a blog called the Dungeon's Depths. That first day, I could tell he was getting twitchy. He certainly wasn't the only one. There was a mob at the front office when the last bell rang. Kids pouring out of their classrooms, swarming like hornets. A few kids were knocked over. As soon as students got their phones back, you could see them turtle faces suctioned to screens. Dee Dee cradled his and called it his precious, though not loud enough for anyone but me to hear. The bus ride home that Monday was church service quiet. Everyone desperate to catch up on everything they'd missed, even though they hadn't missed anything because none of their friends had their phones either. I finished up my math homework while Bench surfed next to me, telling me a whole bunch of junk I could care less about. I heard the kid in the seat behind us mumble something about how unfair it was. I can't imagine going the entire year like this, she said. It was clear from the start that this no phone thing was going to be a problem. The students of BMS would have to find some way to fill the void, some way to stay connected. I just didn't know that something would come about so quickly, or that we would be the ones to start it. Screenless, I looked out the window at the flash of trees. I felt Bench's elbow in my side. "Check this out," he said. He showed me a picture somebody had already posted of Principal Whittingham's face pasted into Darth Vader's body, crushing a photoshopped cell phone in his hand. "Behold the power of the dark side." I nodded and smiled, then went back to watching the trees. This bus, was where it all started, at least for me. This was where I met Bench. It was the last week of August. 6th grade was well underway, and I had made 0 progress finding my people. Despite my mother's promise, I'd eaten all my lunches by myself, spent my classes sitting in the back, walked down the halls trying not to accidentally brush up against anyone. I told myself I was just filling everybody out, getting a sense of the place, but the truth was I felt cut off, stuck behind an invisible wall. Life sucked. Middle school sucked, and I was pretty sure I was destined to spend the next 3 years miserable and alone. Then one day, this boy stepped on. Black hair buzzed to nearly bald, wearing a Calvin Johnson jersey and an expensive-looking high tops, slapping his hands on the back of every seat he passed as if he were marking his territory. I hadn't seen him before. I stuffed my nose back into my book. Reading was the easiest way to avoid making eye contact, and waited for him to go by. He shuffled past, and then he stopped, turned around, and plodded right down in the seat beside me. "You saving this?" I nodded, then shook my head, then tucked my feet back a little so he couldn't see the cheap shoes I was wearing. Saving it? Funny, like there was a waiting list of people that wanted to sit next to me. The bus rumbled on. The boy rubbed his head and smiled. He had a really big smile, a count-all-the-teeth smile. "Cool hat," he said, pointing at the Detroit ball cap I wore every day to school. "Thanks," I mumbled. I made the point of turning a page of the book, even though I hadn't actually bothered to read it yet. "You like the Tigers?" the boy asked. "It was my dad's," I explained. "He gave it to me. He used to like them. Now he likes the Marlins. Dad kept threatening to take me to a game in Miami the next time I came to visit, even though I really didn't like baseball and probably couldn't name more than 10 teams, the Tigers and Marlins included." The boy looked offended. "What? You gotta be kidding me. The Marlins are terrible." He said it with the conviction of a holy man. "I mean, they got like Stanton and Alvarez, but for the most part, they suck big old donkey turds through a straw." "Yeah," I said. I wasn't sure why anyone would suck a donkey turd, or if it could even fit up a straw. But I could appreciate a good image when I heard one. Honestly, I just wear it because he gave it to me. "Now that's cool," the boy said. "I didn't mean anything bad about your dad or anything, just, the Marlins?" He shook his head. "Throw a tiger into a baby pool with a fish and see who comes out on top. That's all I'm saying." "They're pretty big fish," I said. "I'm not sure they'd even fit in a baby pool." My father sent me a picture of a marlin that he had caught on a chartered fishing trip his first year down there. It was almost as big as he was. They're fast, too, and they have swords for noses. I suddenly realized how nerdy I sounded and shut up. Swords for noses? The boy raised his eyebrows. Man, that's gotta be awkward. I didn't know what he meant, this strange kid who just sat next to me and started talking about donkeys and tigers for no reason whatsoever, so I just stared at him. I mean, how are they ever going to kiss another fish without stabbing him in the face? He smiled, all teeth again. I snorted. I couldn't help it, just picturing two marlins trying to make out, writhing around, filleting each other in the process. Yeah, guess I never thought about that. They'd be like poking out each other's eyes and stuff, right? Not that kiss fish each other or anything. No, of course not. Though they got the lips for it. Then the boy made a fishy kiss face by pressing his cheeks and working his lips up and down. He went cross-eyed in the process. It was pretty hilarious. You kind of laugh like a donkey, he told me. I stopped laughing. I realized it had actually been a really long time since I laughed in front of anyone but my mother. She always said she loved my laugh. I think maybe she was required to, though. It's cool, the boy said. Could be worse. My dad farts every time he laughs too hard. That's why nobody makes any jokes at dinner. He raised both eyebrows again to let me know he was dead serious this time. Then he stuck out his fist. JJ, he said. Eric, I said, receiving the first fist bump of my middle school career. But most people call me Frost. Actually, most people didn't call me anything, but when they did, they called me Frost. Frost, huh? How'd you get that? I told him it was a long story, even though it really wasn't. But we were already pulling into the school parking lot. I'll have to tell you some other time. The boy named JJ shrugged. What period you got lunch? He asked. And that was all it took. A fish face and a fist bump, and I suddenly wasn't alone anymore. I had JJ, soon to become Bench. He lived within walking distance of my house, liked video games, and had a trampoline in the backyard. Most importantly, he filled the empty seat beside me and made me laugh. Okay, guys, head over to Schoology and let's have a discussion.